Jay here from Stretford, Paddock, and this is, well, what is it? It's not the one-on-one interview, it's an interview with Chris Wheeler from the Daily Mail. Chris, thanks for joining us. Good to see you.
Pleasure.
Just saying before, it's been a little while since we had a chat. I think it was pre-season was last time.
It's been a while, yeah.
Yeah, you looking forward to this one?
I am. It all comes around quite quickly. Yeah. Oslo next week for the first friendly, and then off to the States.
Off to the States, that'll be a good one. We can't wait. Joe's with me, of course. How are you?
Very well, thank you.
Yeah.
Excited to learn more about Manchester United. Chris, can't wait.
Get involved in the comments in the chat. Any questions you've got from Chris, send them in. Also, as well, if you're not doing already, hit that subscribe button. Yes. Let's get to 800,000 subscribers. With your support, we can get there. A big thank you to everyone who supported us, because this is actually our 3rd year anniversary, Chris. So
congratulations.
Special.
We didn't find out until this afternoon, did we?
Yeah,
3
years since we became Stretford Paddock. Before
I'm honoured to be your guest, even though you didn't even
thought.
know about it. Yeah. Even though you didn't even know about it.
Yeah, we can't even blag that one. Pretend that we got you in because it was like, we need a special guest for this special occasion.
You just cheapened it.
Yeah. An hour ago. Yeah, we're going to ask Chris about everything going on with Manchester United, of course. There's loads of news. We'll start with the one that we know he's done, obviously. Mason Mount, I know you've written quite a few pieces on him joining Manchester United. What do you make of that deal? Because we were chatting earlier and both agreed, good signing, great player, but it didn't seem like it would have been a priority for Manchester United, another attacking midfielder, but it's one that, kind of makes sense.
That's definitely my feeling, is they've identified 3 positions they want to go and strengthen in: centre forward, a midfielder and goalkeeper. And for me, I think centre forward is the one that jumps out as being the biggest need. So I'm surprised that hasn't been addressed yet. I'm not surprised they've gone for the goalkeeper, but for me, the midfielder, given who was already there in the squad, I felt the midfielder was the 3rd of the 3. I'm sure the club would argue that you can't just do it that way, that they will work on multiple deals, and you can't push them at any given rate, that they will happen when they happen. There's 3 different parties: buying club, selling club, player. And it can happen that way. And I don't have an issue with Mason Mount coming in. I think it's a fairly big fee for a guy entering the last year of his contract, but he's a good player, 24 years old, you can't knock that. But I still think going into the new season, centre forward is the one that really jumps out now as having to try and get sorted out, because as we talked about earlier, obviously Marcus Rashford prefers to play off the left. Anthony Martial, unfortunately, as good as he can be, can't stay fit. And Wout Weghorst is no longer at the club.
Yeah. You mentioned, obviously, centre forward. You've written in recent days about Højlund, Kolo Muani, another one who seems to be kind of mentioned, but then doesn't, sort of on the monitored list rather than actively trying to sign list. What's your sort of latest understanding of United's approach for a centre forward? And if it is to be one of Højlund or Muani, do you think that would be all? Or are we still looking for that Kane, that sort of more established number 9 to come in as well?
Yeah, if the budget as it is about 120 plus what you can sell, you've already done 60 or 55 plus 5 on Mason Mount. That's a big chunk of it already gone. You need a goalkeeper, you want a striker. I can't see them doing a Højlund or a Muani and another striker. Yeah. That would be your striker. And so I think fairly early on, because of that budget, I think Harry Kane became very difficult, while Daniel Levy insists on kind of keeping to the 100 or even 80 million pound mark. Osimhen at Napoli became very, very difficult too. So they dropped down to a lower level, to younger strikers, and those 2 that you mentioned. Højlund's the one that keeps coming up. That's the name that seems to be most consistent in terms of that's where their focus is. But as you saw in the past couple of weeks with Mount and Caicedo at Brighton, they will always have other targets, either because those are proper targets, or they're ones to keep people on their toes. And I think there was an element, going back to Mason Mount, Chelsea wanted Caicedo and want Caicedo still. I think in that there was an element of Manchester United saying, right, let's talk about Mason Mount, otherwise we'll switch to your target, Caicedo. So I think there was a little bit of fun and games there.
Suggested that, didn't we?
Yeah, it felt like that.
It feels like that's something United have lacked in the last sort of 10 years or so. It seems like it's been very one track. We want this player, we're going to go after him. Oh, we didn't get him, let's go for next. Like this, not sort of dark arts.
Mischief.
Being a bit more sort of businessy, a bit more creative in how we go after these players. Because you see it on, when you look into business practices and all this, everyone's doing every single thing they can to get an advantage. And it seems like United walk into a room and go, Harry Maguire's our number one target, we'll give you 40 million, they go 80, and we go, oh, come on then. Yeah. Whereas, I almost like to see, well, if we don't get Mount, we're going to get your guy. Exactly. I quite like a little bit of that. Sorry, just as a sort of follow up on the Højlund and Muani thing, you mentioned there about like a 80 to 100 million-ish area for Kane has been kind of rejected by United, or sort of, we'll look a different way. But then reports are that Atalanta are saying, well, no, we want 60 to 80 for Højlund. Has that sort of made United rethink the Kane situation? Has it made us rethink the Højlund situation? Because presumably we're not going to pay 3/4 of what a Kane would cost on a Højlund, are we?
A bit of both, yeah. I mean, when the 86 got mentioned, definitely, there were comments made along the lines of, for 86 million, we might as well pay 14 more and go and get Kane. So I think Højlund would have to move. There's no chance they'll do Højlund at that kind of figure. It moved. I think Man United were thinking more about in the 30s. So it isn't like Mount, where they've gone in at 40 or 50 and Chelsea were at 70, and it was always workable. I think Højlund at 86 is an absolute non-starter.
Right.
I think it's important for the club to make that, put that marker down. I think the Kane thing, I wouldn't write it off, but it just seems, particularly with Bayern coming in quite hot and heavy at 70 plus, and now maybe 80, maybe even more than that. I think that takes it away from Man United, because I think Levy would rather sell to a foreign club, and I think that makes it very, very hard. So I think you are looking at a Højlund. The moment the Højlund target is £86 million, they will also look then at a Muani. Again, that'll be slightly, again around the 50s maybe. It's hard to say, when agents get involved and figures get thrown about, but you're certainly seeing, I think, a kind of rarity with Man United where the budget has come right down. They're having to really work hard within that budget. And as you say, if that means a bit of mischief here and there, well then, so be it. I mean, the thing about going back to Mount and the whole Mount Caicedo thing is what didn't quite sit well with me was that the different kinds of players.
Yeah.
So Man United were saying either, if we can't get Mount, we'll move for Caicedo. It's like, well, do you actually know what you want here? Because one is obviously sits deeper, one's more forward. I'm pleased that they've got Mount, and it's great to have somebody in, and it's a good start. And I always look at the transfer windows as judge it at the end.
Yeah, definitely.
I think people, it's the nature of the beast. The people rush to judgment and they want to call it as it goes on. There's this running commentary about transfer window, but you have to wait. You have to see who they buy, who they sell. But you're quite right. I think that traditionally they haven't always bought well. Not last 10 years certainly. There's been too many sagas that go up, like Harry Maguire, Jadon Sancho. Too many sagas where they've showed their hand too early, and it's been a drawn-out affair where they've not been able to be a bit more cute and work the market. And they've obviously not sold well because, unfortunately, at a massive club like this, the wages that the players get are huge, and the downside is when you try to get rid of them, there's a lot of complications in getting them off the books, basically.
I just wanted to get onto that. You talk about player sales. I think you did an article not long ago saying that it could be up to 13 players that United are looking at moving on. Has there been any movement on that? Because we keep hearing Newcastle are interested in McTominay, or clubs are interested in Fred. I think Fulham were interested in him, and potentially Maguire as well. But there doesn't seem to be anything sort of concrete going on in terms of sales.
Yeah, and that has to change soon, because if they were to go and do Højlund, or let's say, I think at the moment, the way things are headed, having got Mount, Onana sounds closer than anything else right now.
Yeah, definitely.
If you get Onana, then suddenly your budget's pretty much blown. And anything else then is on hold before you can get players out. So I don't doubt for one second these things are running concurrently. They aren't just doing one deal. They are buying, they are selling. And who knows what can come next. But they haven't always sold well. And going back to the story that I wrote, absolutely, it wasn't that 13 players can or will leave. It's they'll listen to offers for up to 13 players. And within that, if I remember rightly, there was 8 who are for sale, actively for sale.
Yeah.
And that, like you say, was your Fred, down to your obvious ones, going back to Erik Bailly, going back to Alex Telles, Hannibal, 8 there that you wouldn't even question for one second. And then there were the 5 other ones who are not openly for sale, but they would listen to offers if the right offer came in. And that would have been, obviously that would have been Sancho, it's Maguire, it's McTominay, it's Henderson, and help me out here with one more. I'm trying to remember who the other one was.
Fred?
Martial was the other one. So 5.
Yeah.
Fred, I think, because he's going into the final year of his contract, that's a little bit different.
He's on the 8.
He would be.
More for
They're
sale.
actively looking to go and sell him. I'd be surprised if he was still there come the end of the window. But you have 8 who are for sale, and 5 who they would listen to offers for. And I think the target for the club is to raise at least 50 million, probably not more than 100. I think they're being realistic. They're not going to get more than 100. But if they can get minimum 50, maybe a bit more, on top of the 120 budget, that in theory would allow you to sign Mount, Onana and a striker. Who the striker is now, it's still a bit of a question mark.
It's just frustrating, like you say, with some of the contracts that we've given to players, and I was reading something earlier about, a lot of the players, I think the wages went up when we qualified for the Champions League, which makes it even more difficult to move on certain players because they're already on big money, and then they've got this little bit of a bonus. People get involved in the comments. What are the comments saying? Any questions you've got for Chris?
Some people questioning this sort of £110 million budget, saying that apparently last year we said we had 100 and then we spent 200 and something without making many sales. Do you think this is a stricter? This isn't the same.
It's not a ruse. It's FFP driven.
Right.
It's absolutely The only thing that interests me would be, and I don't think it would a takeover change the picture? I'm not sure it would, because I think that the FFP rules are dependent on what's gone before. So it's your business model up to this point. Yeah. So I think even if Sheikh Jassim got in tomorrow, would he be able to actually work anything in this window? I don't know for certain, but what I do know for certain is this budget it's hard and fast, unless they can sell.
There was some rumours, wasn't there, that the only real difference might be the money we pay on sort of debt interest payments would no longer have to be paid. But that is a few million rather than hundreds of millions that you might see if it was the bank of whoever took us over. Yeah,
but would that affect things going forward? I think probably more likely, rather than... I don't think you can kind of backdate that and then change your current budget. I could be wrong on that one. I don't know. Yeah. But I believe, this is clearly FFP driven, and I think it's in stone.
Yeah.
One player you wrote about recently, who's we don't know what's happening with, is Mason Greenwood. What's the sort of the latest? I know you just did a piece on him, because it just seems like we're in this sort of limbo where obviously the charges have been dropped, but the club are doing their own internal investigation, but we don't seem any clearer on whether the club are going to keep him, sell him, loan him. What was the sort of the latest on that?
Well, obviously, this whole thing is a very sad story where there's no real winners here. It's been very, very sad right from the start, very controversial, of course. Where we are right now, the reason for the story was because the players are back in training today. Yeah. And so it's a fresh start, fresh season. So the question was, so is Mason Greenwood coming back? Yeah. And the answer was basically probably not. So where are we on this one? And you're quite right, the investigation's ongoing. It began on the day in early February when the CPS dropped all the charges. It's still ongoing. Ultimately, the Glazers and Richard Arnold will have the final say. Erik Ten Hag will have input too. There's things that we can't say, things that we can't, that we can and can't say here. But I think a foreign loan makes the most sense by some distance. I think if it buys, I think the investigation itself has bought them some time. Yeah. But it hasn't solved anything, because Mason Greenwood is still in a situation where he's not able to train with the club. He can't play with the club. It's been the best part of 18 months now. Yeah, I think so. January 2022. Yeah. We have to move on. They have to move on. He has to move on. And I think, but they can't just give away a player who could potentially be a generational talent. And I know that there's a moral issue there, and people will say, but this, and he's been found guilty of nothing. He's an innocent man who's been found guilty of no crime. The moment he cannot ply his trade, but I understand completely the club have their issues too in this day and age more than ever. Social media, women's teams, sponsors, ambassadors, brands. You can't just have someone back. Equally, you can't just give them away. And I think it's always made the most sense that they send him out on loan. He plays in Europe and is he's able then to start playing again, start training again. And everyone can see where it stands. And maybe if he does well, but it's still not possible next summer to have him back, they go and sell him next summer. But I think he'll be worth more money next summer than he is right now.
As far as you're aware, has there been any approaches for him? Has there been any appetite from teams for Mason Greenwood? Because obviously this idea of loaning him out to Europe is predicated on people from Europe wanting him. Does that seem to be an option?
I think teams will definitely want him.
Yeah.
I think that there are options out there. I don't know whether there was reports last weekend about Roma and Jose.
Something like
The club. Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure that's right.
Right.
I don't think there'll be any shortage of teams who would take him on. I think there are examples, we talked before about a couple of them where players have been taken on and dropped by other teams because of their history. But again, Mason Greenwood has been found guilty of nothing.
Yeah.
So I understand, on the one hand, completely the moral minefield that the club are having to go and tread through here. But equally, it's different to other cases because, as I said, he's not guilty of anything.
It does seem as though, obviously this is just my opinion, but that the most likely outcome would be the loan, doesn't it? Because if United just play him and the backlash is quite rightly horrendous, they would have to deal with all of that themselves. If they just sell him, he would be worth very little at the moment because he's not played football in 18 months. We don't know what player is left in there. If you loan him, you remove most of the backlash and sort of push that onto another team, and then there's still a chance he could prove himself to be worth 50 million next season. From United's perspective, that seems to make all of the sense, doesn't it? I can't see another world where anything else happens, really, unless there's a complete line on it where they go, we don't care about that. He's done, we've heard what we've heard, whatever, we're just going to sell him now. But I can't see him just bringing him straight back to the first team. That seems way too disruptive to what has been a relatively sort of cohesive and well-liked team under Ten Hag. I can't see that happening. Yeah,
I mean, I can't see him coming back personally. If I was asked to choose now between yes or no, I'd say I don't think he can come back. And I think, if he does go out on loan going forward to next summer, two problems they'll have is, one, he'll be one more year through his contract. I think he's out in 25, so he'll be going to his final year then. That will affect the transfer fee. Equally, if the buying club knows that you can't bring him back because it's just not feasible, that will impact it too. But I still think Mason Greenwood would be worth more money having played a season in Europe and proven himself, as I'm sure that he will do, than he is right now. Right now, the whole thing's so toxic. It just feels that finding a way forward is very difficult, and the way forward might only be to have him out on loan.
Yeah. Sorry, we've got a question. Colin Wilmot says, if we sell 7 players, do you see us replacing them all? I can't see us doing more than maybe 4 deals incoming. Then will there be a worry about squad depth? If these potential 13 available players, how many do you actually see us selling and replacing?
It's a good question. Yeah, I mean, of those 13, as I mentioned, 8 and a 5.
Yeah.
8 that for sale, 5 that aren't, or they'll listen to offers for. I think of the 8, if any of those go, they won't try and replace them. I mean, I think Fred might be the exception, although Mason Mount comes in, and if you're still going 4-2-3-1, where does Mason Mount fit in? Does Ericsson drop deeper again? I don't know, but I think of the 8 that are for sale, I don't think if Bailly goes, no, it's not a problem. If Tellez goes, not a problem. If Hannibal goes, not a problem. I think the issue is if any of those 5 go. I think if you lose Martial, if you lose Sancho, if you lose Maguire, Henderson, and the 5th one, I keep going the 5th one. Was it Sancho, Martial, Maguire?
Yeah.
Henderson.
It was McTominay, wasn't it?
McTominay,
there we go.
The one. I think.
Have you read this? You wrote it?
I read it. It was a while ago. If any of those players went, those 5 players go, then yes, I think you definitely are looking at having to bring somebody else in.
And where's De Gea on those lists? Because he's
separate again, isn't he?
Yeah, because he's gone technically.
Did you see his tweet today?
It's been
he tweeted an emoji of juggling, I think it was.
Just a juggling emoji.
Yeah, nothing, no context, no comment, just a juggling.
After his yawn last week.
Yeah, it's all very cryptic.
But yeah, so he's not for sale, obviously, because he's technically left.
He's gone.
But he's also someone that would definitely need replacing, isn't he?
Yes, and hence that they are in talks for Onana. I mean, that again, I think, is where the budget's driving things right now. Is they're having to make so many ends meet and try to be fair, to use his kind of emoji to go and like juggle so many different deals at the same time.
Yeah.
They're effectively keeping him on. They're kind of keeping him on, not on the books, of course, but they're trying to keep that option there, because if it turns out that they can get a striker done and it's quite a big price, maybe at that stage that the whole kind of Onana thing can't happen and they go back to De Gea, or do they bring him back as number 2? I don't know. But
just on Onana, I think Fabrizio Romano 34 minutes ago tweeted that United have made an improved bid for Onana, which is worth €50 million with add-ons included, around 45 plus 5. He said that Inter asked for €60 million package, but the sources believe that 55 could make it work. It does seem as though United obviously really going for Onana, but do you see that deal happening? Do you think that's one that will go?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Mount made sense in the start. As soon as they went in where they did, and Inter were where they were, that one you saw being done at a middle price. Yeah. Same thing here. They've gone in at £39 million in the last couple of days. I'm told that was more of a kind of verbal offer rather than a hard and fast bid, but they basically offered, whether it's written or spoken, that they've offered about 39 million. Inter wants about just over £50 million. And again, once you get to that point, 40 and 50, these things tend to get done around 45. It tends to happen. Clearly, Ten Hag, I think, and I don't know how much the FA Cup final was a tipping point here, where he just looked at it and thought this can't continue. But clearly, Ten Hag has decided that he needs a goalkeeper that can play out from the back. In Onana, he's got someone like that. He's worked with him before at Ajax. He clearly fancies him. The club are going for him, and I fully expect that to get done. Yeah.
What do you make of the David De Gea treatment? Because that's been a bit of a divisive issue on social media. A lot of people comment. Even today, he's done that emoji, and you've got a lot of fans giving him pelters for it. Others sort of backing him. It doesn't seem like, for me personally, I think it could have been handled a lot better than how it has been. Regardless of whether you think David De Gea is good enough, and I actually do think it's time for him to move on. Someone who has been here for 12 years, it just seemed a bit. I don't know. It seemed a bit messy.
Absolutely, and I think most people would go and share that view. Whatever your view is of De Gea last season and in the cup final, he's been a great servant. He's got the appearance record, he's got the shutout record, he's the Golden Glove winner. He hasn't gone bad overnight. It's just, I think, a little bit like with Maguire, they're two players who haven't gone bad, but under Ten Hag, they don't quite fit the mould of what he wants. And so, I think De Gea, it's for the best that he moves on. I think he should go with the club's thanks. I think he deserves his place next to Stepney, Schmeichel, you name it, in the pantheon of goalkeeping greats. But I think for the club, for him, for Ten Hag, it's better that he moves on. And you're absolutely right, Jay. It's been handled in a very messy way. To let someone like that, who's been there for so long and done so much, 4-time player of the year, and to have them kind of in, then they're out, then the clock's ticking down. And they just sort of filter away rather than get the send off. For me, it should have been done after at the last home game of the season. Fulham saved the penalty, got the Golden Glove. Yeah. They should have made it clear then. I accept they probably didn't even know then that they were still working it out then. But it would have been so much better to have had a big send off then. Let him go to the cup final. Unfortunately, things didn't work out for him or the club there. But that would have been more fitting, and I think the way it's happened, he sort of faded away rather than got the big send-off that someone like him should have got.
It's a shame, innit? And it does. If this was a sort of a one-off, you could kind of understand it, where the budget seems particularly tight this year, and the wages are a sort of unique issue where he's clearly, not worth what he's on, and there's this optional year, but we don't want to activate that because it would be the same way. This strange situation, but we've seen this a few times where players like Jesse Lingard, who had been at the club for nearly 20 years of his life, I think 20 years of his life, are just allowed to sort of drift away without anyone knowing what's going on until days beforehand. And we've seen it with De Gea again now, where it's literally got to the point where people are blaming him for us not signing Onana, and you see like the sort of anger and the confusion that comes on social media because the club once again don't seem to know their own plan.
No.
Like, does it seem like, obviously you're reporting, you've got more sources and connections than we do. Does it seem as though there's a coherent plan, or does it seem as though, like you said, we may have made this decision after the FA Cup final, which surely the transfer window schedule should be set before the last day of the season? Does it seem confused and messy as it looks from the outside?
A little bit, yeah. And what I would say for definite is the mood from the club on De Gea before the cup final was one that was quite optimistic.
Yeah.
You know, it's almost, don't worry, he's going to sign, everything's in place. The club were up for it, De Gea was up for it, it was all pretty much signed off, but Ten Hag wasn't up for it, and that's the breaking point. And I think that's what makes me feel that the FA Cup may have been the moment that he thought, you know, if he could have got De Gea on lower terms for one more year, in this budget, sign a midfielder, sign a striker, I think he was prepared to live with that. And maybe, I don't know for certain, but I think perhaps the cup final was a tipping point where he thought, we can't keep doing this. And but most definitely, absolutely 100%, the club were on side with it.
Yeah.
De Gea was on side with it, and it was Ten Hag was the person that wasn't really up for it. I'm not sure if you know, but certainly when the club buy players, the club have a veto and the manager has a veto, which means that the club can't foist players on the manager that he doesn't want, and you don't get a manager building up his own squad that the club don't really want, and then he leaves and they're kind of stuck with them.
Yeah.
I don't know whether it's hard and fast exactly the same when it comes to new contracts, but it's certainly my information, and there's nothing that changed my mind about this, that it was Ten Hag, and there's no, I've written this story and there's been no pushback from the club whatsoever, that it's Ten Hag was the stumbling block on the De Gea contract.
I'm a bit surprised, you know, because I think the signs have been there all season with De Gea, that it just wasn't quite. I know it sounds a bit of a contradiction because he got the Golden Glove, 16, or was it 16 Premier League clean sheets? Just, you know, like you said, there were so many games where he did, you know, produce the goods, but then you could see he was struggling in that system. You could see in some of his performances just so un-David De Gea-like. You know, the Sevilla game, the Brentford game, the you know, there's the West Ham game. There's been a few where you go, you know, you used to be able to count David De Gea's mistakes on one hand over the course of 5 years. The Liverpool game, it kind of got a bit under the radar because it was such an awful performance by everyone. So it was surprising me that was a tipping point. You know, but I get it because, you know, it's a cup final against Man City as they go on to win the treble. So if any game's gonna tip you over the edge, then
it hurts.
That definitely did from a fan's point of view. I know you're probably sick of talking about this, but we are going to have to talk about the ownership because it's just ongoing. Is it November, wasn't it, that we had strategic alternatives, the big statement that we all thought this is the end game, and then we're sat here in July, and it's, I mean, you know, the obvious front runners are Sheikh Jassim and Sir Jim Ratcliffe. There is some worry from fans or rumblings that maybe the Glazers are going to stay on. Where do you think we're up to with this? Do you still, sort of, a lot of the reports we've seen of late, and when I say of late, I mean like last fortnight or whatever, have been that Sheikh Jassim is sort of edging ahead. But it's difficult to gauge because these sort of things seem to change so quickly. Where do you think we're up to with it?
It's hard for me too because, as I say, so many things involved in the club, whether it's players, whether it's Erik. We are in touch day-to-day basis. We travel with the team, we watch all the games, we go on tour. This is a little bit different because it's not being handled in-house by the club. It's being handled by Rain. It's being handled, obviously, bids coming in from the Qataris and Sheikh Jassim, from Jim Ratcliffe, even to the point that it seems like Sheikh Jassim was bypassing Rain to make direct bids to the Glazers, who've never, of course,
so good stuff.
You've got the Glazers who have never been transparent ever.
No,
you know, they've never shown their hands. So you've got a very kind of dark and slightly mysterious situation here. I wish I could go and put more light on it, but I think clearly the mood from the fans is for the Sheikh to get in. I think because it would be 100% ownership. The crucial thing is the Glazers go, and I think Jim Ratcliffe, on the one hand, he's been quite smart in offering the Glazers a kind of seat at the table because that's going to tempt them to, obviously go for him. On the other hand, it's not a great move, of course, because the fans, understandably, completely oppose any sort of Glazer involvement whatsoever. So it'll be interesting to see how it kind of pans out, this one, because, as I say, Ratcliffe's bid is quite a canny one, but there's pros and cons to it. The Sheikh, it's just wham bam, straight in, 6 billion, there you go, let's go and move on sort of thing. And I can understand why people would prefer that kind of route.
Do you think there's an option, or is it any realistic option that they stay on without the Sir Jim Ratcliffe bid, like by sort of a minority sale. I think there was talk of, is it Elliott Group, were perhaps
the hedge funds.
Someone like that coming in.
Yeah.
Do you think that is still a possibility?
Always. I wouldn't rule anything out here. I think the Glazers. Look, I mean, the cost of Man United, the profitability, the football business in this country is only going to go one way. It's only going to go north. There's only going to be more money. From a Glazer point of view, I think Man United are only going to be fatter, more juicy, more profitable, more wealthy. They just see money, going forward, and they will. So I think there's always that possibility. If they can't get what they want now, they'll just sit tight and say, fine, we'll just keep on going. And we know that over the next few years, someone will come back to us. They've got very thick skins, obviously,
they don't care, do they?
I do sympathise with the fans who, they had the protest, but they can't get to the Glazers, which is probably not it's not a bad thing. But they've got such thick skins. I think people maybe kid themselves when they think that they can somehow scare them out of town or anything else. They will do what they want to do. Money will talk. Fingers crossed, either Jim Ratcliffe or the Sheikh have got the money to go and make them do business.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen it. We saw, the protest of the Liverpool game. Yeah. How often do you see a game getting postponed because of protests about the owners? That's unheard of.
No.
And yet, even after that, they made these promises, didn't they? We're going to speak to the fans, we're going to do this. I think they've had, is it one Zoom call with the fans forum or something like that? It was Joel or Avram, I can't remember, I don't really care. And there's been nothing. No. And it's like, like you say, they've got thick skins. They turn up at the cup finals, at the women's FA Cup final, at the men's FA Cup final, at the Carabao Cup final. Like they've not got a care in the world, and it's just, from a fan's point of view, it's just incredibly frustrating.
But it's interesting. Sorry, that so quickly after that European Super League fell through, how quickly the Glazers and FSG at Liverpool, they've since come back on a decision, fair enough, but how quickly the Glazers decided to go and sell up once the whole Super League thing died, and maybe they realised that the money might not be as kind of forthcoming as they'd hoped. They very quickly decided to go and sell up, and we'll see. I mean, it could go anyway at this stage, and I wouldn't rule out any of those three possibilities. That they could stay in situ, they could sell completely and sell out to the Sheikh, or they could sell up most of the club and stay around for 2 or 3 more years.
Yeah, just a bunch of spoilt brats.
Maybe they think that without the Super League, the growth won't be as quick at United as that 5 billion could be grown in another business somewhere else in the world. So obviously the latest with the Glazers seems to be no one really knows at the minute because they've gone quiet. But what is your understanding of the sort of the mood in the club? Because people like Richard Arnold, John Murtagh, Darren Fletcher, who have got these kind of footballing and business roles that are often the ones that how a coach will come in and bring. A manager will come in and bring new coaches. Owners will often come in and bring in a new CEO, a new chief exec, a new footballing director. Are they worried? Are they unsure about what they're doing? Because this is, from the playing side, it's one thing, but these are some of the most powerful people at United who may well lose their job if a new owner comes in. What are they thinking at the minute?
It's a good point. Yeah, absolutely. And I think anybody will be safe. When it could be the Sheikh, it could be Jim Ratcliffe, it could be nobody. But I think if the club gets bought out, as with any manager of a football team who gets a new owner, you don't pay £6 billion just to go and sit there and do nothing. You have your own ideas. These are clever people who've done a lot in business, and they'll have their own ideas. So I don't think anybody's going to be safe in the long term. Certainly, if there is a takeover. In terms of longevity, they've probably got more chance if things stay the same, and just keep on. But absolutely, I think if it goes to the Sheikh, if it goes to Jim Ratcliffe, there will be changes. How much, I don't know, because it hasn't happened yet.
Well, just on Erik ten Hag, because we've had a full season of him now. You've obviously, you've been at the press conferences, you've got to see him firsthand. What have you made of the job he's done so far at Manchester United? Because coming in after Ralph Rangnick, it was just a shambles, wasn't it? We'd finished 6th. A load of players had left on a free transfer. The contracts ended. There was question marks about almost everyone. You had the Ronaldo situation. There was, it was all sort of up in the air. We won a trophy. We got Champions League football. I think the fans are behind him. What have you made of him from sort of what you've seen and the job he's done?
Very good. He came in, like you say, at a time when the club was an absolute shambles.
Yeah.
Ole going, Ralph coming in. Ralph was obviously very outspoken. There was all sorts.
It's been great for you guys.
It was. those were busy days, yeah. But he came in at a very difficult time, and to to stabilise the club as he has done and change the culture the way he did do, to take on like Ronaldo the way he did and sort that one out, to make bold decisions about the captaincy, for instance. I think he's been very strong. I think he's done really well. I think, top 4, 3rd place, and a cup in his first season, a cup final, quarterfinals of the Europa League. I thought, he's done an absolutely bang-up job, and he deserves the backing that he should be getting this summer. Against that, no one's perfect. And I think there were some painful moments. Of course, there were painful moments. The Anfield game was a stain on the history of the club. 7-0 to Liverpool hurts beyond belief. And it's not something that you can just forget. That will always be there, as was the 5-0 last year, 6-3 to Man City, losing the cup final. All these things aren't great, hurt. But they will hurt him too. He is a winner, and you could see him. You could see him bristling. The post-cup final in June. The comment he made about the backing that he didn't get in January. Yeah. He's a winner. He's coming to win. He wants change. He wants success. And he wants it quickly, and that's what the fans should want too. And I think he wants to move fast. He wants more money behind him to get in the players that he wants. He wants to compete with Man City, and that's a big gap right now. But I think overall, 8 out of 10 for his first season. I think he's been absolutely fantastic. I think he's changed so much at the club. But as I say, games like 7-0 to Liverpool, that doesn't go away quickly.
No, bang on. Just before we wrap up, we've got some more comments. Anyone in the chat?
Dan Hodson says Uncle Chris with a waving emoji. That's to you. There you go.
Uncle Chris. There you go. So see your nephew saying hello.
Yes, hello there.
Yeah, but a lot of discussion about Jim Ratcliffe and Qatar and who people would prefer. A lot of questions about transfers as well in terms of sort of any left field rumours. There's a goalkeeper, a Dutch keeper that you mentioned in an article a few days ago. I forget his name now. But is there anyone else who maybe we haven't got around at the minute as fans, but United, there's something simmering away there?
They will always have other options. And they've got to have those in the same way, like for Højlund. They have other options there. With Mount, they had Caicedo. That's always the way they will do business. Yeah. So I think what makes it a little bit more confused in this transfer window is the budget, and so what they spend on the goalkeeper will impact what they can spend on the striker, and vice versa. So they're having to balance the books. They're having to go and juggle options. But yeah, they will always have other. I think the fact now that they've gone in for Onana and made the bid, I think that will get done. I think they'll get a new goalkeeper. It will be him. What that will mean for De Gea, I think he'll probably now go. They've got Heaton, Henderson, I think will end up going too. Yeah. But the next thing then of having got Onana, having got Mason Mount, will be the striker, and that'll be the hard one now. It's how much money have you got, what can you sell to basically buy, and what level can you go to?
Just one other thing I wanted to ask before we talk about selling players. Obviously, one reason I think we've struggled to sell players is the way we've done contracts over the last 10 years or so, giving people who are too old big contracts that no one obviously wants to pay any money for. But is there an issue with sort of the people in charge of selling players not really having the relationships to get people out the door quickly? Because someone like Fred seems like the sort of player to me where he would fit in, I would say, certainly 7 or 8 Premier League teams midfield, maybe even more than that. I think he's a good player, but not that top level. But we always seem to struggle to sell, like Maguire. He gets in, I think, every team in the bottom half would have a Maguire, and most teams in the bottom half have got 30 million to spend. Why do we struggle to sell, even, I know it's only 3 weeks into the window, but we struggle to sell people? Is that a connections thing, a relationships thing? What's going on there? Because it always seems to be the case.
I'd say 2 things. First of all, we don't sell very well, full stop. We never have done. Even under Fergie, we never sold well. And I saw a stat the other day that Chelsea in the last, I think, 10 years, they've made about £500 million from player sales. We've made about 100. It's not good enough. And I think the main thing, and going back to a point that Jay mentioned earlier, is the actual player wages. That's the problem. When you bring players to Man United for those transfer fees, everything sort of kicks on from that, because if you're bringing a player in for a certain transfer fee, he automatically commands wages at a certain level. That's why Mason Mount is going to be on like $250 a week. The problem then is when you try and sell them. and I did a story about a month or two back about Maguire. And the problem with him, he's on, well, as you say, Jay, now they're back in the Champions League, the money goes back up again. So he's on about 200 a week now. The problem is, if you're trying to sell him to one of these clubs, like you say, in the bottom half of the table, they can't do those kind of wages.
No.
So I think the club are looking at the fact that Maguire will probably be earning about 100 if he moved to a Villa, Everton, someone like that.
Yeah.
So therefore, he's got 2 years left on his contract. He'll be earning half of his 200 in those 2 years. So effectively, Man United will have to pay him off to the tune of about £10 million. And that's the problem.
It's mad, isn't it?
That's the problem. Teams just can't take him back. Teams just can't take him on.
Yeah.
Right.
And also, why would he move to those clubs for half the money? He'll say to Man United, okay, I'm not playing, it's time to go. If you want to sell me, that's fine, but you must give me the difference I'll be earning there that I would have been earning here, and that will be £10 million.
It's mad that only a club like Manchester United could find a way to make Harry Maguire cost us 90 million.
Even more money.
Yeah, we've found a little loophole there where he's going to cost us money. Like I said, I don't blame Harry Maguire because that's your wages. That's your wages.
Yeah.
No matter what your job, you should be paid what you're entitled to, and he is entitled to that in his contracts, whatever. So
I do sympathise with him, Jay. I mean, I say nobody. He didn't ask to go and cost £80 million.
No.
He didn't ask to be made captain. And he did quite well first couple of years, just under Ten Hag. He's obviously not the kind of player that Ten Hag wants. The issue now, with him is that it's time to move on. There's a word that's not very sexy called amortisation, and what that is, I'm not sure if you deal with the club about this, but what it is, if they sell him at £30 million, which is probably what you're looking at maximum.
Yeah.
The club would not say they've lost £50 million on him because he cost 80. What they would say is he signed a 5-year contract. We've had 3 of those 5 years. I think it might be 4 or 6 years actually. I think he signed a 6-year contract.
Yeah.
And he's been there for 4 of those 6 years. So they've had 4 years use out of him. It's a bit like a second-hand car.
Yeah.
They've had 4 years mileage out of Harry Maguire. So they're not going to lose £50 million on him. His price comes down accordingly with each year of his contract.
Yeah.
So because of his age, because of his contract, because of where he is right now, he is worth about £30 million. But take off £10 million for his wages. I don't think you'll shift Harry Maguire for much more than 20.
Kind of makes sense. It does. It's a little bit frustrating the way the club has gone about things, but this is where we're at. We'll have to wait and see what happens anyway, whether we're going to get rid of Harry Maguire, whether Onana, looks like you said, Onana could be the next one. Make sure you go and check out Chris on the Daily Mail and on Mail Plus, of course. Should be a link in the description. You know where to find Joe, Sloppy Joe's.
Yep.
Sloppy Joe's podcast. You know where to find me as well. And if you've not done already, make sure you are hitting subscribe. Chris, thanks for coming on the channel. I'll have to get you on again. Thanks to you as well, Joe.
Cheers.
And thanks to you for watching. See you soon.